Back with you here in Indianapolis for the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine. And as promised, I was trying to track you down at some point this week because ESPN insider here, Jeremy Fowler, and we've used some of your reporting in the last couple of weeks on our show with Sarah Ellison. And I actually wanted to start with this. I wanted to ask you if you had your analyst hat on or your reporting hat in a recent feature that you did where you referred to re-signing Ronnie Stanley as a priority. Which hat did you have on?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. I would say I feel like, based on asking around, that they have made him a priority. Now, I think they have a threshold for how much they'd be willing to spend on Ronnie, given some of the injury history. But when he's good, he's really good. And last year he was good. Yeah. So he has earned the right to put himself on the market and do pretty well, and there are a lot of teams that need a tackle. It's not a deep tackle class in free agency. So it's going to be a little bit of a standoff, I bet, in the next 10 to 12 days, see if they can hammer something out or if he's going to get free.
I'll tell you what, as soon as I heard your piece, I'm like, all right, I'm going into the Combine week. And yesterday, Harbaugh and DaCosta, as you know, spoke. Yeah. So that kind of that was my framework going in questions-wise. So I asked Eric, how much of a priority would it be? And then I kind of combed it into hey, how confident would you be in Roger Rosengarten to shift over to left-hand side, being that he has past experience? If you were to lose Ronnie in free agency, he deferred to Harbaugh. So I was like, hey, Harbs, how about you? And he goes, oh, we're probably going to keep him. He made some news yesterday in Baltimore. He said, we're probably going to keep him. It's just a matter of what the market dictates, obviously, in the coming weeks.
Yeah. I mean, he's got one of those Ravens for life type resumes, right? It feels like he probably should be that. They value that there. They are a organization that values, the tried and true Ravens, right? And the mystique and guys that put a whole career together in one team.
Yeah.
And so I think that weighs something. We'll see how much that weighs for Ronnie, but I think for Baltimore, they appreciate that and want that. And, that settles a lot for them because they could lose Patrick McCarry, who's kind of like their do-it-all guard, center, tackle. And if they lose him, at least you have Stanley and Rosengarten on each side. Sure. To be able to have some stability.
And obviously the centerpiece in Linderbaum, they're probably going to try and extend him at some point, being that he's the 2022 class along with Kyle Hamilton. But anyway, I wanted to ask just big picture going into the offseason. You don't expect them to be big spenders, obviously. It's the Ravens. Eric was saying that just the other day. Probably a lot of veteran minimums, right? Like latter half of free agency types of moves. Yeah. You're not going to probably see an uncharacteristic splash like they did with Marcus Williams a couple years ago. Yeah. Unfortunately, that didn't really work out well for them. But as you look at their offseason as a whole, what do you expect?
So I still think they need, even if it's just for depth, a little bit more on defense, whether it's on the back end, maybe an extra corner. I mean, Brandon Stevens, I think, is going to have a sneaky good free agency market. He can make he can make a little bit, not huge money, but I think he could make decent money. He's long, he's played a lot of football, and so they got to replace that spot. Maybe they do with the draft, but if you want to get a corner in free agency, maybe one that's cost effective, I can see them doing that. So at least one more piece on defense, and then. Really the bigger decisions for them are less about signing free agents and more about, what do you do with a Mark Andrews, right? What do you do with a Ronnie Stanley? Some of these legacy players that are, either late 20s or getting into their 30s. What do you do with those guys? So for them, it's more bigger decisions. Do you let Isaiah Likely go and be the tight end one, or do you roll with Andrews, who has been really good for them, is only 28 years old. I know, he didn't have all the production that he usually does this past year, but still a good player. So we'll see, but I think on defense, they could add another piece somewhere.
When you and I were chatting off the air yesterday, I was like, hey, have you thought about any potential willing trade partners for Andrews, being that it would be an $11 million cap difference? That's been about 24 hours. Have you thought anything about that? I know there's a lot happening at the Combine.
Yeah, I think, enough teams need a tight end. I think of the Jets, who are losing one, Saints are losing one. Washington needs one if they don't re-sign Zach Ertz. So there are some options out there that Baltimore could maybe explore. Because I do think what's tricky about his situation is he probably needs a new contract. And so does Baltimore want to do that or not? Do they want to get something together that lessens his cap hit now and keeps him there for multiple years? Or do you want to just move on? I think they probably need to make that decision now. And no option is a bad one, I just think it's about the preference from the player and the team.
Would likely too. It's like you look at the tight end room and they've made a lot of swings. Obviously, they took some swings and a lot of them have paid off. And you wonder, had Andrews not been around, would likely be a household name at that position by now. I watch a lot of him. My gut tells me yes. How about you?
Yeah. You're talking about likely as the guy.
Well, had he just been drafted to a different team,
right,
and not been behind Andrews these last few years, I wonder if he would be a household name at this point.
Maybe, but you never know how a guy's going to develop, and maybe he needed that time, right? Like if you're thrust into action as a starter, some guys aren't ready for that. He probably had an ideal situation where he could be groomed into that role, learn from Mark Andrews, and now you're ready to be like a tight end one. So it's interesting. It's a good problem to have for Baltimore to have two good guys like that, especially with this offense. Even though it's evolved with Todd Monken, like it's still largely about the tight end and the catch radius and being able to work the middle of the field with those guys.
And how do you assess the potential trade markets for Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel?
I mean, they're both tough. Teams tell me that Cooper Kupp does have trade value because despite sort of the trifecta of like age, injury, and declining production, still really quarterback friendly, still really smart, can still get open, like, good for a locker room. So there are enough positives where there should be something to shake out. And then, Deebo Samuel, I know there is interest. Teams have called, but it is tricky because they can save a lot more on the salary cap if they release him versus trading him. So it's like, well, teams wait them out. You know, that's what I'm interested to see. So I don't know. It's interesting. There's not like a logical home necessarily for each guy, but there's going to be like New England would be foolish not to at least look into Cooper Kupp. Washington with Deebo Samuel, and they have some ties with GM Adam Peters that can make some sense. I mean, there are enough needs out there that could satisfy.
The reason why I'm asking is I know Ravens are in good shape, right, at 1-2 and wide receiver with Zay and Bateman, and you got this tight end room that's incredibly strong. I don't think they're going to be in the business of taking more swings in the first round at wide receiver. They've done a lot of that with DaCosta in recent years. So I guess what I'm just wondering is, like they have in the past, bringing in a potential veteran to bolster that wide receiver room. I wonder if that would be logical and or feasible given their cap situation.
Yeah, it could be. They're losing Nelson Aguilar. Who else are they losing?
They got to figure out if Tylan Wallace is coming back or not.
Oh, yeah, they're losing Tylan Wallace.
So right now it would be
they could at least use
Zay Bateman and the tight ends right now in terms of pass catchers.
Which you can get done, but they could probably use one more. Yeah. I agree, but I don't think it'd be like a splashy signing.
No.
Maybe a mid-range guy, like a 3-4,
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. What about Jair Alexander? I mean, everybody in Ravens Nation, they say, oh, Lamar and him played at Louisville together. They got to get the band back together.
Yeah.
But what do you think his market's looking like?
It's early.
The guy's been banged up 3 of the last 4 years.
It's early, but he's as a player, he'd probably be the top corner for agency if you take that out of it, but you can't take that out of it. So I would think he's got a market. It wouldn't take a massive trade haul. Like it'd be pretty reasonable just given his age. Actually, he's still pretty young though. I think he's 27.
Late 20s, yeah.
If he can stay healthy, he can be a really productive player. You just you don't know how motivated he's going to be, but I think he's motivated. So they can shake something out. I don't know if I see Baltimore doing that, just given what you'd have to give up and what you'd have to pay him to. But they do need an extra corner. So
let's get you out of here on this. Brandon Stephens, you just mentioned it a minute ago. You think his market's going to be sneaky? Did you say sneaky good? Is that what you said?
I'm calling it sneaky good. I don't think he's going to be like top of market, huge cornerback money. But I've talked to enough teams who bring him up sort of unprompted. Yeah.
Now, where I'm going with this is this was obviously a highly targeted player. DaCosta at the end of season press conference essentially said, "Hey, we're going to go let him test the market," meaning I don't expect him to be back in Baltimore. It's a bummer too. This is a converted running back.
Yeah.
Was it SMU? Am I remembering that correctly? I think it was SMU. Can't remember. But from running back to corner, he was drafted as a safety. They played him a lot at corner, but he had a hard time with the ball skill side of things, ball awareness, whatnot. Was heavily target the size of a friggin' ocean on his back this past year. But yet you're still hearing his name buzzing.
Yeah, I mean, like I think he'll do okay. I think he'll do he'll do decently well on the market, because there are just enough teams that need one, and they might not want to spend the top dollar for like the Byron Murphys and guys like that. So we'll see.
Jeremy Fowler, ESPN. Now we know. Now you finally know who the culprit is over here from New Orleans. By the way, our midnight Rendezvous.
That's
you
awesome.
and the missus walking along the streets of the French Market,
I know.
being asked about Aaron Rodgers only in the Super Bowl.
That's awesome.
Appreciate you for stopping by, man.
Thanks again.
Absolutely. Jeremy Fowler, ESPN.